Why certainty failed without warning. Nothing dramatic announced its collapse. No headline exposed it. No single event challenged it. Certainty simply stopped working, and most people noticed only after it was gone. To understand why this matters, we need to revisit a period when certainty felt earned. Markets had adapted to shocks. Systems felt refined. Risks appeared mapped. Participants trusted not just their models, but the consistency of outcomes those models produced. Certainty wasn't confidence. It was familiarity reinforced by repetition. For a long time, decisions felt justified before they were even made. Scenarios were anticipated. Responses were expected. When uncertainty appeared, it was quickly framed, categorized, and absorbed. The market believed it understood its own behavior. The first reveal begins when that understanding quietly loosened. Predictions still worked, but less reliably. Outcomes matched expectations often enough to avoid alarm, but not often enough to inspire conviction. Certainty didn't disappear. It softened. The second reveal appeared in how participants talked about risk. Language shifted from clarity to probability. From "this will happen" to "this should hold." From conviction to qualification. Nothing sounded wrong, but nothing sounded solid either. Certainty was being padded instead of questioned. The third reveal emerged through response timing. Reactions still arrived, but they felt slower, less instinctive, more conditional. The market didn't rush to confirm its own expectations anymore. It waited to see if they would survive contact with reality. That waiting mattered, because certainty isn't just about being right. It's about acting as if response is assured. When that assurance weakens, the system still functions, but without authority. Decisions become reversible. Positions become provisional. Everything feels manageable until it suddenly isn't. The market hadn't lost information. It had lost belief in its conclusions. And when certainty fails quietly, it doesn't announce itself as doubt. It announces itself as delay. What followed reveal how dangerous that delay can be, and why certainty is most fragile precisely when it feels least challenged. As certainty softened, the market continued to operate as if nothing essential had changed. Models still produced outputs. Strategies still generated signals. Decisions were still made, but they were made with a subtle hesitation that hadn't been there before. The conflict emerged in commitment. Trade replaced, but they were lighter. Positions were held, but with tighter exits. Conviction didn't vanish. It fractured. Participants wanted exposure without ownership. They wanted upside without responsibility. Certainty no longer carried weight. Liquidity reflected this shift immediately. Depth appeared, but it didn't assert itself. Capital waited to see if expectations would hold before committing fully. Support formed late. Resistance arrived early. The market still moved, but it moved cautiously, as if unsure of its own conclusions. The tension deepened as its behavior repeated. Each decision hedged against its own possibility of failure. Each reaction was designed to be reversible. The system became flexible, but flexibility replaced decisiveness. Certainty was no longer something to act on. It was something to monitor. Institutional desks adapted accordingly. Risk frameworks widened acceptable ranges. Scenario planning expanded. Decisions required more validation. None of this was reckless. It was rational. But rational delay, when shared broadly, reshapes market structure. Derivatives markets captured the discomfort quietly. Protection stayed bid even when volatility remained low. Skew reflected uncertainty about conviction, not direction. Traders weren't pricing fear. They were pricing the possibility that certainty might fail again. The buildup continued as participants adjusted to life without firm conclusions. Outcomes were treated as tentative. Plans were kept flexible. Optionality replaced decisiveness. The market functioned, but it no longer felt anchored. Veteran participants recognized the warning clearly. Certainty doesn't fail when people are wrong. It fails when people stop trusting that being right matters. When conviction dissolves into caution, decisions lose force. The market was still making predictions, but it was no longer standing behind them. And the next phase would reveal what happens when a system built on tentative conclusions is tested by uncertainty that demands commitment. Because some moments don't allow for provisional answers. They demand belief or expose its absence. That test arrived when the market faced uncertainty that couldn't be hedged away or deferred. A situation where probabilities weren't enough, where someone had to act with conviction, and no one did. Prices moved and stalled. Participants waited to see if certainty would reassert itself. It didn't. Buyers hovered, unwilling to commit size. Sellers pressed cautiously, sensing hesitation. The market wasn't surprised. It was undecided. The conflict intensified as delay compounded. Each pause invited further pressure. What once would have been absorbed quickly now lingered. Certainty had failed to provide direction, and without direction, response fragmented. Liquidity exposed a weakness clearly. Depth appeared briefly, then withdrew. Support formed only after levels were breached. Capital no longer trusted its own conclusions enough to act preemptively. The market had lost confidence in certainty itself. Institutional systems reacted mechanically. Algorithms reduced aggressiveness. Risk controls trimmed exposure. Committees revisited scenarios. Every response was cautious, reversible, and late. The system was protecting itself from being wrong. But in doing so, it surrendered initiative. The buildup accelerated as correlations tightened. Assets that normally offset one another moved together. Diversification weakened. When certainty fails, behavior aligns around caution. And synchronized caution amplifies movement instead of containing it. Veteran participants recognize the danger immediately. Markets don't need false certainty to move. They need real conviction. When certainty softens into probability and probability into hesitation, price becomes the only decision maker left. As pressure persisted, familiar levels failed quietly, not because sellers overwhelmed them, but because buyers never arrived with belief. The market adjusted lower in stages, each one confirming how little certainty remained to defend it. That was the realization. Certainty hadn't been wrong. It had been abandoned. And once certainty is abandoned, outcomes are no longer guided. They are assigned. The final phase will reveal what happens after certainty fails without warning, and how markets rebuild direction once belief has to be earned again instead of assumed. Because certainty doesn't disappear with noise. It disappears with silence. When the adjustment finally came, it felt less like a shock and more like a reckoning. The market didn't collapse. It conceded. Prices moved to levels where hesitation could no longer survive, where indecision was too expensive to maintain. That was the climax. Certainty didn't fail because it was wrong. It failed because no one was willing to stand behind it when it mattered. Once conviction disappeared, the market stopped negotiating. It chose direction through price, not belief. Liquidity returned only after that choice was made. Capital stepped in cautiously, but with clearer intent. Support formed lower, firmer, and far less generous. The system found balance again, but it was a balance built on acceptance, not assumption. The resolution unfolded through behavior rather than headlines. Participants shortened decision cycles. Conviction had to be earned again, not borrowed from past success. Certainty was no longer treated as a given. It became conditional, tested repeatedly before being trusted. What lingered was the deeper lesson. Certainty is not the absence of doubt. It is a willingness to act despite it. When that willingness fades, even correct conclusions lose power. Markets don't move on probability alone. They move on commitment. The period that followed felt different because it was decisions carried more weight. Reactions came earlier. Hesitation was no longer admired. The market had relearned something fundamental, that certainty must be defended, not assumed. Understanding this reframes how confidence should be read, not in forecasts or models, but in behavior. Who is willing to act first? Who absorbs uncertainty instead of deferring it? Who stand behind conclusions when timing matters most? Because the most dangerous moment for certainty is not when it's challenged. It's when it quietly stops being used. So what do you think? Are we acting on what we believe right now? Or are we waiting for certainty to prove itself first? Why